I know you've written about this, but just kind of remind us, how do elections typically impact market performance, kind of impact, that?
Yeah, definitely. So I've done a lot of work on this, and just looking back in history, if you think about first-term presidents, the way stock markets usually work is you have decent returns in years 1 and 2, but year 3 tends to be a really, really good year if you look back over all the first terms in history, or at least over the last 100 years or so. And then usually the election year, year 4, it can be mixed. It's generally still good in line with averages, but generally it's kind of mixed. And this year, I mean, it has been a banner year all the way around. The S&P is up like 25%, which is way above kind of a normal year. And even the lagging parts of the market, like mid cap stocks, small company stocks, are up mid-teens. Emerging markets are up kind of 12, 13%. So, I mean, there's been a lot of gains all the way around this year. Bonds are up, but not really as much as what I was hoping. But yeah, I mean, generally we've gotten kind of a really good year, which kind of sets things up interestingly for this, what could be termed a second term of President Trump.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because the terms aren't running back to back. So it's kind of one term and now coming back. So it's interesting. Do you feel like it can almost feel like another first term in that sense?
It could, yeah, it could, but I mean, the dynamics of a second term,
Hmm.
he can never run again, so it's
Yeah,
kind of, we'll get into it in a little bit, but
yep,
a little bit of a lame duck scenario. So,
yep,
there is that, but because you know there was a different president between his
yeah,
first term and second term. There is definitely a different flavor to this second term than we've seen really. I
yeah,
can't even, like, the 1800s
yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
yeah.
Well, I guess this is probably everyone's reminder. Stay invested regardless of who is in the White House. Stay invested because markets do over time move higher. But kind of walk us through what's happened in the market since.
Yeah, so the market has reacted very strongly to this, at
Hmm.
least here in the US.
Hmm.
So if you look at the S&P mid cap stocks, small cap stocks, I mean, there's been a very broad-based rally the last couple days, and I think that really stems from, because Trump won with a GOP Senate and likely a GOP House. The prospect of tax cuts is certainly a lot higher than what it would have been if Harris would have won.
Hmm.
So there is hope. If you go back to 2016, when Trump won and passed his tax reform, that was a very meaningful boost to company earnings, and stock prices are kind of based on earnings and fundamentals. So if people believe that those earnings are going to be higher than what they would have been, then stock prices will go up. So we've seen a little bit of that in the U.S. The international has been a little bit different. It's been, Wednesday was not good for international, for developed markets or emerging markets. Yesterday was a little bit better. Today, Friday, November 8th, it's not looking so good. And, again, I think that's because the market is pricing in, well, what does a Trump administration mean for trade tariffs and protectionism, and, kind of trying to move manufacturing back to the US, which has to come from somewhere. So, you're seeing just a lot of, I'd say not great stock market returns the last couple days in
Yeah.
international. If you look back to 2016, we saw a very similar dynamic, and it kind of turned around right afterwards. So I don't want to read too much into that, but
Hmm.
that's kind of the initial market reaction.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting when it moves so much so quickly. Like you said, this year the market has done really well. So then to have, I think it's been the best week of the year in these
Mhm.
last few days. That makes a really big difference on top of an already good market. So yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess when you kind of look ahead, thinking forward, what do you kind of expect from the market kind of under a Trump presidency over the next 2, 3, 4 years? Kind of global markets, maybe let's start there. What do you kind of expect? Kind of more of what we've already seen in the first week?
Yeah, yeah. So, kind of looking outside the U.S. to start, I do think it is challenging. I'm not going to lie. It's Europe was looking good over the last couple of years. A lot of their slow growth problems were at least temporarily relieved. But they really they're having a lot of problems, and it's kind of sad to be honest. You're seeing Germany is really their industrial base is getting hollowed out, and that's a quarter of the European economy right there, and they're having a lot of issues. The Ukraine Russia war certainly has hurt them because they're very dependent on natural gas prices, and that's been at least a little bit in 22 and in 23 was a big problem. So, I would say kind of Europe, I kind of look at that and I'm like, I don't know. That's not looking too good, particularly if Trump is more protectionist, even against our European partners.
Mhm.
Other parts of the developed market world, Japan, I think will be fine. They're, kind of under the radar. They've been doing a lot of the right things. I think their economy is a little bit better positioned to kind of take advantage of protectionism if that is going to happen here in the US. And then some of our, the other markets like Canada and Australia are probably going to be fine. They're resources driven, and we still need a lot of resources to kind of power the economy. So, that's that. Emerging markets, the big question is, what is China going to do? What is that going to look like? And, we have in our models a structural underweight in China because, frankly, they just grew too big too fast and are going to have to digest this. They're trying to reform a little bit, but having Trump in office is really going to make life difficult, I think, for China. So China's going to face a lot of hard choices. They don't have a lot of room to maneuver. So, I as much as the U.S., and I'm a big believer in diversification and investing internationally and whatnot. But I mean, it really is when you kind of just look at the cold hard facts. The U.S. just looks so much more attractive than a lot of these other areas right now. And I mean, that was the case before Trump was elected, but even more so after.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's really helpful though, just to kind of dive into and see how have markets kind of performed under similar administrations.